Hi, my name is Tan Yijen and my matrix number is 278637. So for today, I'm going to present about the case study that I researched, which is the profitability and its determinant of Apex Healthcare Berhad. So let's proceed to the overview and the introduction. So this is the logo of Apex Healthcare Berhad. Apex Healthcare Berhad was a retail pharmacy when it's founded in the year of 1962 in Malacca. It does not only operate in Malaysia, but it also has subsidiaries in different countries such as in Singapore, and the offices are in Vietnam and Myanmar, but the main center of the leading healthcare center is in Malaysia. Apex Company had been ranked in the top 10 pharmaceutical companies in Malaysia and is also listed on the main market of Bursa Malaysia publicly. It is an incorporated and public limited liability company. And last, Apex Company is an investment holding company and operates through some business segments such as manufacturing and marketing, corporate, and wholesale and distribution. Next, based on this case study, the research objectives and research questions have been made. First of all, the research objectives are to investigate the internal factors towards the profitability of the company, and the second one is to find external factors toward profitability of the company, and the last one is to study the internal and external factors towards the profitability of the company. For the research questions, the first one is, what are the internal factors that influence the profitability of Apex Healthcare Berhad? And the second one is there any relationship between external factors towards profitability of Apex Healthcare Berhad? And the last one is followed by what are the internal factors and external factors towards profitability of Apex Healthcare Berhad? So now let's proceed to the internal and external factors. So what are the internal and external variables? Let's start with the internal variables. For the first one, it is the company performance. So, company performance can be said that is one of the important aspects in a good corporate governance. This is because, based on the research of Tao and Isor, it suggested that the firm's performance was considered as an achievement gained by management, the economics of the world, effectiveness, and also the efficiency of the company. There are some financial measurements that can be used to measure the firm's performance, which includes ROA and ROE. And the next one, which is the liquidity risk. Liquidity risk is a financial risk where the company is not able to trade quickly enough in the market or cannot meet the short-term debt obligations. It occurs as the investor of the financial institution fail to convert the asset into cash without incurring a loss due to the inefficient market or lack of buyers. Thus, current ratio, which is the variable of liquidity risk, normally acts as an indicator to measure the risk. For the next one is the credit risk. Credit risk is known as the possibility or risk that a loss may happen to the borrower because of the failure of another party to pay back the loan. Thus, it can be measured or calculated based on the consumer's overall ability to repay by looking at the two main variables, which are the average collection period and debt to income. For the fourth variables, it is the operational risk. Operational risk bring the meaning of the risk of a loss resulting from a failure or inadequate, which includes processes, control, failure or information system, external events and human errors, where this tends to exist in every organization. In a business, it can be calculated by the degree of operating leverage, which is a very famous indicator for measuring and calculating the operating risk. The degree of operating leverage includes the operational ratio and the operating margin. Last but not least, is the corporate governance is the last of the internal variables. Corporate governance is a system of rules and processes by a company in directing and controlling. It refers to the way where companies are governed and to what purpose. The principle of good corporate governance includes transparency, fairness, accountability, independence, and responsibility. The measurement indicator for corporate governance is known as CG Index, where it is measured by the effectiveness of board of directors and the audit committee. So now, let us look on the external variables. The external variables only includes market risk. Market risk, which is also known as a systematic risk, it is the possibility that an entity will face the losses due to some factors. The variables that are under the market risk includes unemployment rate, inflation rate, interest rate, and also exchange rate. So now, let us proceed to the methodology. For the first one is sampling of data, then followed by the second one, which is the data collection. Last but not least, the third one is the data analysis. Now, let's begin with the next one, which is a trend analysis of Apex Healthcare Berhad Company. So for the first one is the performance. It is seen clearly that there is no much difference with the value and the trends. We can see that from the trends, it decreases from 2015 to 2017 for both variables, and that it increased to 2018, and finally it drops in 2019. We can say that both of the ROA and ROE is the lowest in the year of 2019. Since in 2019, both ROA and ROE is the lowest among the years, this indicates that the Apex Healthcare Company does not maximize the use of asset in 2019 compared to the other 4 years. But for ROE, although it is the lowest in 2019, but it is still safe to consider to generate its profit efficiently. This is because based on research, a ROE is said to not be favorable if it is below 10. Now let us look at the second one, which is the credit risk debt to income. The debt to income trend is said to be not consistent as its decrease, increase, and increase from 2015 to 2019. Based on the graph, in 2016, it records the lowest, which is 9.33%, and the highest in 2019, which is 15.2%. A good debt to income is said to be in the range below 20. Hence, Apex Company can say to be good debt ratio and earn more rather than O. Thus, from this, we can conclude that Apex Company is said to be under no financial stress. Now, let's look at the last one, which is the operating margin. The operating margin trend is decrease, increase, and decrease from 2015 to 2019. The increase from 2016 to 2018 in operating margin shows that the company is improving their efficiency in controlling their company overall costs. Although it dropped the next year, but it is not the lowest since in 2016 it records the lowest with 86.78%, and the highest is in 2015, which is 97.42%. Now, let us look on the descriptive statistic and the correlation table based on the internal and external factors of Apex Healthcare Berhad. So this is the descriptive statistic. So from the table, the first one we can see is the return on asset, which is also known as ROA. The return on assets for the company is 0.1470 and a standard deviation of 0.0258. This indicates that Apex Healthcare Berhad tends to make a profit of 14.7% from its asset and 2.58% returns along these 5 years. Now, let us proceed to the correlation table. So, the left side represents the Pearson correlation and the right side represents the significant one tail. Based on the Pearson correlation, we can see that most of the variables are negatively correlated to dependent variable or known as return on assets. There are only 4 variables that have a positive relationship towards the ROA of Apex Healthcare Berhad, while another 7 are negatively correlated to the ROA. The positive correlated variables to the dependent variables are ROE with 1.000, average collection period for 0.519, the operating margin at 0.535, and the last one is inflation rate with 0.425. So the other 7 of negatively correlated includes current ratio, debt to income, operation ratio, CG index, and all the external variables except the inflation rate. Now, let us look at the right side, which is the significant one-tailed table. Based on the table, there are only 2 variables that are significant to the return on asset of Apex Healthcare Berhad. The 2 variables are ROE and debt to income. ROE stands for 0.00, and for the debt to income, it is only 0.019. Both of the variables can say to have a strong significance relationship towards the ROA. This is because their value is less than 0.05. While for the other 9 variables, they are said to have no significance to the dependent variables. Let us move to the last part, which is the model summary and coefficient for the 3 factors. For the first one, which is the internal factors model summary and the coefficient table. Based on the model summary, we can see that the adjusted of R² is 99.4% of the dependent variable is explained by the independent variable, namely operating margin, current ratio, and also debt to income. While the remaining of 0.6%, it can be found in other variables but is not in this study. Last, for the W Watson, the data is only 2.925, and this is considered not to be good, because a good W Watson range should be greater than 1.5 but less than 2.5. Now, let us look at the coefficient table. Based on the table, it shows that the debt to income and operating margin is significant to the ROA, with a p-value of 0.03 and 0.059 respectively. The debt to income is said to be moderately significant, while operating margin has a weak significance. This implies both of the variables influence the profitability of the company. However, the current ratio is not significant to the ROA. Besides, based on beta value, we also can illustrate that when the debt to income decrease, the ROA increase, while for operating margin increase, the profit also increases. Last, for the current ratio, it can only stay as negatively influenced. Now, let us look at the external factor of model summary and the coefficient table. Based on the model summary, the adjusted R-square is only 49.1% of dependent variable is explained by the independent variable, namely unemployment rate, inflation rate, and exchange rate, while the remaining 50.9% are also said to be found in other variables but not in this study. Then, for W Watson, the data is 2.098, which is considered good, as it is greater than 1.5 but less than 2.5. Then for the coefficient table, it shows that all three variables, which are inflation rate, exchange rate, and unemployment rate, does not influence the profitability of the company. These three variables are said to be no significant to the ROA, but based on the beta, it shows that the two variables, which are inflation rate and unemployment rate, are said to be positively influenced, and for exchange rate, it is negatively influenced. Last but not least, we will be looking at the model summary for internal and external factor, and also the coefficient table of internal and external factors. Thus, in the model summary, we will use R-square instead of adjusted R-square, as it is in negative value. Based on the R-square, it is 33.7% of the dependent variable is explained by the independent, while the remaining 66.3% can be found in other variables but not in this study. Last, for W Watson, the value is 2.170, which is also considered good, as it is between the range 1.5 to 2.5. For the coefficient table, all of the variables, namely average correction period, operation ratio, and exchange rate, does not influence the profitability of the company. Three of the variables are said to be not significant to the RA, but according to the beta, it shows that the operation ratio and exchange rate are said to be negatively influenced, while the average collection period is positively influenced. In this study, we can conclude that there are two variables significant which affect the company profitability, namely debt to income and operating margin. Other than that, from the coefficient table, we also can determine that the debt to income is negatively influenced, while the operating margin is positively influenced. Thus, an increase in company's profitability will increase the operating margin and decrease the debt to income. Based on this conclusion, I recommend that since the debt to income is negatively influenced on the increasing in profitability of the company, in my opinion, the company can maintain to have a lower debt to income but avoid taking on more debts, as a low debt to income will ease the company to able for borrowing loan or line of credit. Last, for the operating margin, which has positively influenced in increasing the company's profitability, in my opinion, this shows that the company has the ability to earn enough money from its business operation and pay off all the costs involved in maintaining the business. To increase the operational profit, the company should increase the sales, and the percentage of sale of cost of goods sold should remain unchanged. Thus, the result of this study is not very accurate, but to get more accurate result, more sample will be needed in this study. And that's all for me today. Thank you.